Namaste. Welcome to episode 3 of Your Missing Piece. Hope you've been enjoying episode 1 and 2 and the accompanying meditations, the companion meditations that go along with them. In episode 1, we were looking at presence and acceptance. In episode 2, taking a deeper look into attachment and impermanence. And in episode 3, I'd like to take a little look at the Yin Yang principle. Yin and Yang, the two opposing energies and opposing forces of life, which is true for the wider cosmos on the huge galactic universal scale, right down to the smallest of cells. And it is also true for the deeper human experience, which is why I would like to explore the Yin Yang principle a little deeper and how this can help you with your mental health and deepen your understanding of your own journey as a human being, and hopefully gain a deeper insight into why people are the way that they are. So, we've looked a little in episode 1 and 2 into presence and acceptance and attachment and these sorts of things. So let's go into this episode, just by bringing all of those concepts to the forefront. So we are remaining present, we are remaining in a very accepting place, a very allowing place, open, spacious, clear, drawing deep breaths in, really focusing on the present moment, the here and now, because I am not attempting to impart any information as such to you. I am trying to point you towards deeper insights that you can have for yourself. And it's curious, it's very interesting that if you can bring yourself into that very present, very accepting and very allowing state, all of these insights will come to you regardless of what you read or listen to. The amount of times that I've been deep in meditation and insights have come through, and then later on I read that this is a Buddhist principle or this is a Taoist principle, I'm like, that's interesting. I can see how those insights arose in certain sages and masters, because the very same insight arose in me when I was in a very meditative state. So you don't necessarily have to be in a formal meditative state to listen to this, but just getting into that state may help with some of the deeper concepts, because I don't wish to communicate with you on a neocortex mind chatter information exchange level, because we've all had enough of that, and that's a very shallow level, and it's very sort of let's argue back and forth and chatter, because it satisfies the mind somewhat, but it never satisfies anything here. And this is the level that I would like to speak on during these podcasts. This is the point, to bring it in deeper and take a look at this common shared experience that we all have, because ultimately we are all one part of the same whole, and because you are part of that whole, that means you are the whole. And this is what I would like to explore a little deeper. Yin Yang. Let's put the little Yin Yang symbol up here. So future Corin, please, if you could just drop a JPEG of the Yin Yang symbol up here, that'd be swell, thank you. Yin Yang, this symbol you often see in sort of spiritual shops, and we kind of vaguely understand it as a Chinese character, but we're not 100% sure what it is exactly. Let's just take a deeper look at this symbol. Yin Yang, the term, the earliest known recorded mention of Yin Yang is on something called oracle bones, which date back to 14th century BC or BCE, whichever term you want to use. Old, basically, very, very, very ancient. These oracle bones, which were an ancient divination practice where ancient people would use animal bones and sort of scatter them on the ground, and it's like reading tea leaves. You would scatter them on the ground and you would intuit a certain understanding about the world or about the universe or about the future, about sorts of things like this, the way of interpreting the world by using natural intuition. And on some of these fossilized bones, there is the etchings and carvings, and one of the symbols they believe is Yin Yang. And the meaning that they have interpreted from here is that it's reference to the cold and the heat. So they say that the yin is the north side of the mountain, the cold side, and the yang is the south side of the mountain, the warm side. And this is an ever-present concept then throughout all of Chinese history, but it's also a concept in Western science as well. And it's very interesting how, whether it's philosophers or scientists, religious, poets, all people who think a bit deeper have noticed that there seems to be this curious interplay of opposites and how one thing seems to define the other. So taking a look at this symbol again, let's take a look at this symbol. We have the black and the white, and they seem to chase each other around a circle. Now, this is a beautiful symbol because in terms of the visual design of it, it implies a movement. It implies a perpetual, constant movement of this wheel, this constant circle, as the black chases the white and the white chases the black. The beauty of it is that you can see from this movement that black will never overcome the white and white will never overcome the black. They just chase each other. But notice here, the easily missed part of this symbol is the fact that there is a black dot within the white and there is a white dot within the black. And herein lies the crucial, easily missed element of Yin Yang, is that white implies the black and black implies the white. They can't exist without each other. So, can there be an up without a down? Could you ever have just an up? Or could you ever have just a down? Can you have a left without a right? Could you have heat without cold? Could you have day without night? These opposites need each other. They need each other. And the yin and the interplay of yin and yang is a beautiful play that has been going on and will continue ad infinitum. They continually chase each other around, and this forms the movement of the universe. So let's take a deeper look into yin and yang separately. So the character Yin Yang is a singular, but we can explore yin and yang separately because they are opposites and they are different. Even though they are equal, they are different. So they're equally powerful. However, each side represents a different facet of the fundamental nature of reality. And as I explain this, take a deeper look at how this might relate to energies within you. Because have you ever noticed that you seem to have two sides? That there seem to be two sides to you? And anyone that you are close to and you have spent a lot of time with, have you ever noticed that there seems to be two sides to them too? This is what I would like to give a bit of a deeper insight into today. So, yang. Yang and yin. What should I start with? Let's start with yang. Yang elementally is associated with fire. And it is associated with heat. And it is associated with physical material, the physical world, and it is associated with energy, but direct energy, very overt, very powerful energy. This is yang. This is the force of the universe, the force of the world. And this is, they would call the masculine principle, which is not to say the male principle, but the masculine principle. And I'll explore a little bit further into this because gender is going to come into this, but I'll explain a bit deeper into this because gender is one of these subjects that everybody starts getting a little bit like, a bit tetchy about, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in a moment, so bear with me. But yang is represented by the masculine energy, which is associated with fire, action, energy, directness. And so on the human level, on the sort of emotional human spirit level, it is associated with assertiveness, it is associated with confidence, with physical strength, with directness, and with force. Yin is elementally associated with water and is associated with night and is associated with cold. On a human level, the human emotional spiritual level, yin is associated with subtlety, with compassion, with fertility, with creativeness, with elusiveness, with love, compassion and caring. And yin is associated with the feminine principle. So this immediately, I imagine, to the Western mind, seems a little archaic, because it's like, oh, well, Corin, are you implying that men are like this and women are like this? You're saying that men are dominant and assertive and women are emotional and submissive. That is not what I'm saying. But there is when we talk about yin and yang, we talk of it in terms of masculine and feminine principle. So it is a complicated subject to try and discuss now, because I don't wish to offend you, but anybody who has spent any time on this earth has noticed that in general there is a difference between men and women. There is. And similarly to how the yin chases the yang and the yang chases the yin, we are obsessed with each other. We are continually chasing each other around this circle. But this is not like a trendy concept to talk about. We have been trying to force the two together. And we have been trying to say that, no, men and women are exactly the same. And I'd like to put across, to explain my position on this, that I would feel that this is a mistake, because I think we are defined by our differences, which is not to say that we are not equal, because we are, but we are different. And let me clarify further. When I say men and women are different, I mean the masculine and the feminine are different. So although your physical form may be male, you may exhibit mostly yin energy. You may exhibit mostly feminine energy. Similar, you may inhabit a female form physically, but exhibit mostly yang energy. Now, in my experience, and I can't speak for all women or all men, in my experience, most male physical forms that I have met exhibit mostly yang energy in varying degrees. And this is also true in the animal world as well. You see a male dog exhibits mostly yang energies and a female dog exhibits mostly yin energies, with many variations, because it's beautiful and infinite in its variation and its changes. So this is simply I would invite you to think about which of these energies is your predominant energy, because this, I believe, is where many of us are going wrong. We feel very uncomfortable in our own energy, the energies that we exhibit, and if we are mostly yang, we feel like we should be more yin, and if we are mostly yin, we feel like we should be more yang. Yin and yang. So I've explained a little about the human experience of yang and yin in their positive manifestations. And I would like to explain about why the two need each other. I'm going to explain a bit about the negative expressions, because a lot about finding peace and happiness is about finding balance. And this is something I had to learn to do in order to recover from my mental health issues and addiction, because addiction is essentially when something is out of balance. And balance is a very difficult thing. It's a great thing to strive for, balance. Buddhism is, or the Buddha himself, Gautama Buddha, said that you should follow the middle way. This was the proponent that this is the principle that he tried to teach, was the middle way, which wasn't extreme deprivation and starvation, such as the ascetics, but it wasn't also decadence and constant pleasure seeking either. It was the middle way between the both, and in that way you can rifle through life rather than cannonball through life. So, trying to find balance and trying to find the middle way between these two energies. So, on a larger scale, why does yang need yin? Because when we find this balance, it is beautiful between the two, and we must reconcile these energies within us, because when the yang and the yin are in balance and harmony together within you, you will find peace. And it is not complicated, it is not difficult, it just requires this acceptance and allowing and this presence, and the energies within you will flow beautifully. And I would invite you to have a deeper look into which energy is your predominant energy. Would you say you are a mostly yang person or a mostly yin person? And when you have found that, and you can exhibit those energies with perfect confidence and perfect joy and perfect energy, you will be in a much happier place, acknowledging that you just don't really have a great deal of yin, or you just don't have a great deal of yang, and that is absolutely fine. You shouldn't try and force yourself into a shape that you are not. Yang, let's take the sun as the example of yang, and let's take the earth as the example of yin. And isn't it fascinating that whenever we speak about Earth, the planet, as a goddess or as a divine entity, it always is a female figure. Always. We always talk about Gaia and Mother Earth, because Earth is fertile and gives birth to life, and everything is nourished by the earth, and everything is nourished by the oceans and by the soil. And we speak of Mother Earth. And so the earth could be considered the yin energy. And let's take a look at the sun. And whenever we look at the divine incarnations of the sun, they're always male. They're always male gods. We have Apollo and Ra, and these figures, Zeus, and figures like this that are represented by this sort of overt dominating energy. And just that in itself is beautiful, to take a look at how the sun and the earth work together to create life. So yang yearns to express its energy and express its heat and its fire outwards, and the yin, on receiving and yielding to that energy and that fire and watching that energy and that fire, gives birth to life and can nourish all things. And this is a beautiful part of female nature that we have completely missed recently. We are, I think, because female mental health issues are rising, and for some reason we look at a lot at male mental health at the moment, and I think female mental health is being neglected a little bit. And I think there's a societal shift with regards to the sexes. And I think if we're not careful, we're going to miss some of the deeper lessons from history. We're going to end up not fulfilling some of our deeper needs and not recognizing and respecting the deeper energies within all of us. And there are some beautiful aspects of female nature that are being actively discouraged by society because we are trying to force young women to be very yang in their expressions, and we applaud and clap the dominating this image. It's almost becoming an archetype in itself of this strong, independent woman who is almost cold and callous, and she's become, yes, we need more female CEOs who are hard and uncompromising. Why? Yes, I believe we need more female CEOs, but we need more female CEOs and we need more female world leaders because of the beautiful yin female energy that they can bring to these roles. And it would be a mistake to say, right, we need to put women into these traditionally male roles and then we need to force them into the shape of a male. And we need them, yes, they need to be business owners and they need to be hard-nosed and direct and uncompromising and incompassionate. And we are neglecting the fact that the power and beauty of women comes from their, in general, I don't mean to offend anyone, and I know I'm talking in this could be interpreted as sexist. I don't mean to say that everybody is like this. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is we're missing the fundamental beauty of yin energy, which is compassion and joy and creativity and yielding and a certain aloofness and it's not seriousness, because these qualities in a manager can be a manager, business owner, a leader can be so powerful to have a more compassionate and emotional approach rather than a constant mind direct approach, because we've had enough of that. We've had enough of the practicality and the money and the figures and the numbers, and we need more of a compassionate and empathic understanding. And I believe this could be a phenomenal opportunity for the yin energy to start taking center stage, because we've been exhibiting and it's all part of this beautiful balance, but for the longest time we've been obsessed with yang energy. Our society just hammers home that yes, the way to be successful is to be very yang and powerful and overt, and your life should be about action and money and gaining the physical material wealth. And we have completely neglected the inner world, the emotional, spiritual world that is crucial for the survival and the thriving of the human race. So yin energy could do with gaining some respect and recognition, and I think it's a mistake to try and force women into a yang position. Yes, more female CEOs. Yes, there needs to be this balance, but we need the balance because of the energies that both sides can bring to these roles, because that's how the human race is going to evolve, is by reconciling these energies. So yang as the sun, yin as the female earth, and because they are the perfect distance and the interplay between each other works so well, they need each other to exist and then for life to spring forwards from that. So yin and yang. So, I spoke a little bit there about the yin energies, and again, this is not to say that we don't have we don't have both energies within all of us, because within everyone there's an interplay of both. Now, I spoke a little bit there about how society seems to be attempting, in our rush to make everything equal, we are trying to force females into male positions, and we're trying to force males into female positions. And I believe this is a mistake as well, because you cannot force the yang energy to become more yin. It just won't happen, because if you pour water down a volcano, it's just going to evaporate immediately. It doesn't really work. And there seems to be a trend of, ever since I was a boy, ever since I was really young, I was always encouraged to be like, you must talk about your emotions, and you must be more sensitive, and you must be more emotional. And this isn't always going to work, because you're trying to, I think if we are going to put men and predominantly yang energy people into the more traditionally female yin positions, then it needs to be because those positions could benefit from that extra yang energy. But you won't be able to turn yin into yang, and vice versa, because they chase each other and they complement each other. And if both sides could express their energies without fear, and could express their energies in complementary nature to each other, then the world would be a much more beautiful place. But all too often it's seen as a fight, like we have this sort of war between each other. Like there is a conflict, and this conflict is incredibly upsetting to both sides, because the masculine needs the feminine and the feminine needs the masculine. And I'm gonna say that the yang needs the yin and the yin needs the yang, because I don't mean all physical male forms and physical female forms, because have you noticed in homosexual couples that one of the partners seems to exhibit mostly yang energies, and the other seems to exhibit mostly yin energies. So I'm not talking about the physical sex that you were born with, it's the energy that you exhibit, and they need each other. But when they start fighting each other, that's what becomes toxic, and that's what becomes so demoralizing, and what can become so frustrating. And what ends up happening is that you just end up sort of washing your hands of the whole thing. You end up just saying, oh, well, because men don't understand women, and yet we are fascinated by them. I mean, even me doing this now is like, it's very yang of me trying to demonstrate that, look at my mighty intellect, how much I understand women. Like please recognize and admire my understanding of you all. It's just, we can't escape our nature, and it's very yang that we are sort of obsessed with yin, and we are constantly chasing the yin, and we desire the yin's attention, and we desire the yin's approval, and the yin remains persistently elusive and aloof with all of this, and is very rarely overt in its recognition, and it's very much like, oh, okay, yeah, well, whatever, yeah. But on a more subtle level, maybe incredibly impressed by something that the yang does, but the yin nature is very, very cautious about giving anything away. The yin is sort of the moon, the mystery, the feminine mystique, as they call it, and it's very subtle, and this infuriates the yang. It's summed up perfectly by this. It's summed up perfectly by this debate of, what do you want to eat tonight? And well, whatever, I don't mind. And this is like, this infuriates the yang, because the yang wants, I know I need information, I need data, because I want to get this right, and I want to impress you and do the best for you. And the yin is like, well, I don't mind, just get whatever. And it's like this interplay between the two that is summed up perfectly. It just said that my file size is about to reach its limit, so I have to stop and restart this. I'll be back in a second. So, the other example of this interplay between yin and yang, I don't actually know the film, but it became a meme, and it's got Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone in it, and they're arguing, and he's saying, what do you want? And she's saying, I don't know. And this infuriates him further. He says, what do you want? She says, I don't know. And it goes back and forth, and their energies are just escalating and escalating. And this is what happens with that interplay between yin and yang if we don't recognize and respect the opposing energies. So this is what I wanted to go into, because, I mean, it's a bit like, Corin, what are you talking about? Oh, you're getting very metaphysical with all of this. But I want to give some practical advice and guidance, because when I looked into these energies, it gave me a much deeper understanding, not just about the nature of the world and of the universe, but also on a deeper level within myself, because I recognized that there is no light without dark, and there is no dark without light. So maybe I go through periods of unhappiness and low mood, and a sort of a more quiet time, and a more sort of low mood time, which is quite yin. And I also go through periods of this like huge, like, yeah, very overt, fired up, powerful energy, which is far more yang. And this would cause a bit of dissonance and conflict in me, because I wouldn't know which one of those two that I am. But I'm both, because they're both two sides of the same coin. Which side is the coin? Is the tail the coin, or is the head's the coin? Which one is the coin? They're both the coin. And so in your nature as well, don't feel bad if you go through periods where you just feel different, you feel low on energy, you feel a bit suppressed, you feel more contemplative and more reflective and a bit quieter and less inclined towards action and movement. You don't feel so much like forcing things. You would rather contemplate and meditate and be more reflective. And this is perfectly fine. This is another facet of your nature. This is you in your tail's position, in your female position. All of this, I know, sounds so offensive, but I don't mean to be offensive. I hope some of it is self-evidently true, that this is a more reflective state, is the more yin state, the more emotional and less obsessed with this desire for control. And then other times you may feel more energized, and you almost have this sort of, it's almost uncomfortable in itself, because you feel you need to get something done. And this is the yang energy manifesting within you, and the balance between the two, because you need both. If you are yang all the time, you will burn yourself to a ash. And if you are yin all the time, you will sink into a sort of passivity, because yin in its ultimate state is ice, and yang in its ultimate state is boiling. And this is not productive in either state, because the yang overdone just incinerates, and yin overdone just sort of sinks away into passivity and nothingness. But if you can get the balance between the two, this is when we create life. And within you, this is when you create the beautiful things that you're on this earth to create, because you have the balance between the yin and the yang. If you look at even my channel and you look at the videos, sometimes it's very overt and very yang, and I'm doing my workout videos or my motivational videos, and it's like yes, like let's go. That's me in my yang state. And then I may do a meditation video, which is much more peaceful and accepting, and let's just accept where we're at and stay very present. This is me in my yin state. And Western society doesn't really like to permit this, because it's like, no, you must be one thing. You must be one of these things. Which is it? It doesn't like the complication. Which of these two are you? I'm both. They're both expressions of my being and of my life. So within you is this yin energy and this yang energy, and they are both you, and they are both beautiful, and they are both absolutely fine, and finding a balance between the two will give you an enormous sense of energy, because you can fully embody. You won't feel this guilt. If you're a generally fairly yin person and you get this yang energy within you, you might think something's wrong. Like, God, what is this? No, I need to sort of suppress that and push that to the side, because you may not feel 100% comfortable and confident in feeling confident. So some days you might be a mostly yin sort of person, and some days you feel driven and you have confidence and courage and you're ready to like smash something. But because you feel you're something else, you go, oh, I can't really exhibit those energies because that's not who I am. No, do it. If you feel it, do it. Because this is going to create balance. So it's like whichever energy that you're feeling that day, really embody it. Really lean into it and feed that energy, because it will end up creating the most spectacular things within your life. Trust me. So one of the things that we can also do is respect and acknowledge the opposing energies that we see, because a lot of the times between yin, yang, masculine, feminine, men, women, whichever you want to call it, when we get fed up with the opposing energy, it inevitably leads to frustration, and frustration leads to anger, and before long, that's when it does become sexism, because you become tired of not understanding so this is when you get men who hate women and women who hate men, because they're tired of the other side, and we begin to feel like the other side is responsible for our unhappiness, because you're not acting in the way that I imagine you should be acting. Because it's like when men feel like women should be acting more like men, and so like an example would be, why can't she just say things as they are? Why can't she just be logical and practical? And because that maybe that's not in her nature, and you need to acknowledge and respect and love that, and acknowledge that is different from your own fundamental nature. And the opposite is true as well, in that you may have women who are frustrated and fed up that their man is fed up and frustrated that the man in their life is not expressing themselves on an emotional level, and they don't speak on an emotional level. They're not going to, because that's not in their fundamental nature, and the way they're expressing their emotion is through action and practicality, because this is how the yang expresses itself. It doesn't express itself using yin forms, it expresses itself using yang forms. And if the man goes and, I don't know, whatever he does, if he goes and plays rugby, or if he goes and does something, if he goes and writes, or if he goes and, even if he goes and plays darts, this is him expressing his yang energy, and this is how he's going to express that emotion. Because we speak on different terms, and we resonate on different energetic levels. And it gave me a huge sense of peace and relief when I really began to admire and respect and try my best, even though I probably will never 100% get there, is to really admire, respect and acknowledge the yin energy in women. But it's almost become impossible to compliment women without being sexist. Because if I say the thing I love about female nature is compassion and emotion and aloofness and elusiveness and subtlety. These are the things I admire in women. But that is, to the Western ears, sexist. Because, well, oh, Corin, so are you saying that all women are emotional and all women are not practical? That's not what I'm saying. But because we're constantly trying to hear for implications, and each side is trying to, assumes that the other side is trying to control them. But they're not. Each side loves each other. The yin loves the yang and the yang loves the yin. But sometimes that manifests. Because let's take a look at what happens when yang and yin are out of balance. So when yang is in its balanced, beautifully positive, energetic state, it is very driven, it is very action orientated, it is very logical, it is very direct. It gets a lot of things done within the practical realms. This is yang. It is very assertive and very dominant. And the thing is, as well, about these energies is that they are phenomenally attractive to the other energy. Because the old phrase of opposites attract is very true. And in its balanced state, a yang state of energy and action and directness and physical strength and confidence and courage, this is incredibly attractive to the balanced yin state, which is more receptive and which is more, I'm going to say, passive, because it's almost like, oh, here comes the yang energy, the sun, fire energy, and it's going to come and it's going to bring light and heat and warmth to the yin state, which is going to give birth to life. So the yin, the balanced yin energy admires the balanced yang energy, just as the earth admires the sun, because it will give a beauty and a abundance of vital life energy to the yin. But when the yang state is unbalanced and it becomes unstable and exhibits its negative energy, it becomes assertiveness, becomes aggression, and its confidence becomes a sort of violence, and this practical nature and this very logical nature becomes a tendency to try and force and control. And you may have even witnessed this within relationships. If you're female and you've had relationships with men, that men, when the things that you at one point really admired and loved about them, sometimes manifests in a much more negative form, and what used to be a sort of assertiveness and yes, this is what we're doing and this is how things should be, which was a more balanced and democratic sort of, if this is okay with you and let's work through this, but this is what I believe we should do and this is what I'm going to put my energy into, this then becomes, no, this is the way things are going to be and you better do what I say or else. That is when the yang has become imbalanced. And this is when we start to, it's almost like a totalitarian fascist nature to it. And this happens to men who don't recognize the yin within themselves, who haven't learned to balance their own nature within themselves. All they learn how to do is just feed the fire more and more and more until that energy just becomes overwhelming and they just become these domineering people who are desperately unhappy at heart because you can't control jack shit in the world. But the yang tries to force everything into a shape. So you may have seen that before, you may have witnessed that before in men who at one point this confidence that you were attracted to has now become dominating and could become aggressive and violent. If that happens to you, get out. And I mean it. You need to have the courage and confidence to leave immediately, because that's very difficult to row back from. And in a relationship, relationship, a man exhibiting violence, they may not stop, you need to go. The opposing side of this, so yin, the yin energy, which when balanced is very open and very receptive and much more yielding, and balanced in that it can take in lots of different things into account and will wait until they have all the right information and act on that information in a much more gentle and slower place, the yin energy when balanced. If this becomes, what am I also going to add in there? There is a certain melancholic element to the female nature, which is beautiful in itself, because the emotional nature sometimes veers into a sort of a wistful, melancholic nature, and our society doesn't permit this. It says, no, you're not allowed to be like this. Strong, independent woman, that's what you need to be. So it won't allow for this, but it is a fundamental part of the human nature, the yin energy, and it needs to be respected in itself, because there's nothing wrong with that. But it is there, a sort of melancholic, and melancholy comes from melancholia, which is a Latin term for the black bile, which is a sort of a substance within you that leads to this sort of, it's not even an unpleasant sadness, it's the sort of sensation when you listen to a sad song and it kind of brings you to tears a little bit. This is melancholia. It is not necessarily depression or low mood, it is just a sort of playful sadness. And this is an element of the female nature, the yin nature, that when unbalanced becomes depression, and depression becomes too passive. And you'll notice here, the unbalanced yin state is too passive and will allow an unbalanced yin state to walk all over them. And you see that this is the nature of oppressor and oppressed, because the yang state is too powerful and too overt and dominating, and the unbalanced yin state is too depressed and too passive and yielding and just whatever, yeah, sure, walk all over me. Which again is not to say this, because this happens as well when women who have unbalanced yang become too dominating and too domineering, and the bloke becomes too passive and too yin. It happens both sides, and you sometimes get it when you get the bloke. You see it sometimes walking down the street. The bloke's defeated. He is just completely passive. He's like, yes, dear. No, dear. He's walking behind her with the shopping bags, like, yeah, whatever you say, dear. Anything for an easy life. And she's like, no, this is how it should be, this is how it should be, this is how it should be. But for some reason we find that image comical, and yet the other way round, of the man being too dominating and the woman being too passive, is deadly, which it can be. So either way, we need to readdress this balance, because when the yin and yang states are both balanced within ourselves and with each other, this is what creates a beautiful relationship, because it's okay for the balanced yin to admire the balanced yang. Where's the harm in that? Where is the harm in the yin admiring the yang? And where is the harm in the yang having this obsession with trying to gain approval and admiration from the yin? If it's balanced, then we're in the right place. Again, which is not to say that it has anything to do with the physical sex. This could just be, if you're a mostly, so this is the practice that we can do, is to take a look at which energy do I most identify with. And interestingly, I would say I'm unusually yin, because the world I live in is a very emotional place, and I'm far more reflective and far less naturally inclined towards action than most of the men I know. And this has been the source of a lot of stress for me throughout, not now, but it has been in the past for this physical form, because I've always felt somewhat of an outsider, and I've always felt somewhat odd and different, because I'm unusually sensitive. This is how I can talk about things like yin, and I'm not afraid of offending people, because I'm mostly yin. I would say I'm for a male physical form, I'm particularly feminine, in that my world is quite an emotional world, and I am very sensitive, and my feelings are easily hurt, and my natural state is actually very passive. But I don't consider I previously considered those things to be negative, but I've now come to recognize, appreciate, and admire them, because they are simply expressions of yin energy. And if I can balance that yin with my more yang side, which is, yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go, this is what creates a more valuable work, a more valuable service that I can bring to the world. Because if you'll notice, even when I'm very yang in my exercise videos, if there's the element of yin in there, where let's take that rest period and stay present with it, and let's really think about what this exercise means for us, trying to connect the exercise on an emotional level. What's the goal? What's the target? Why are you here? A much more reflective level. Now we have yin and yang working in harmony, and this is what creates a much more effective product. So, yeah, I would consider that I probably exhibit more yin energy than most male physical forms do. So yin and yang, and you see this in the interplay between light and dark, ice and fire, cold and heat, up and down, and they're both sides of the same coin, and we all have both sides within us. So I'd encourage you to take a look at balance, and take a look at your relationship with the opposite, I don't want to say gender or sex, but the opposite energy to what you usually exhibit, and recognize its difference. Recognize but not with an analysis and interpretation, and this is right or this is wrong, but simply acknowledging that there is an opposing energy. Because if you look at the yin yang symbols, I guarantee you are one of these two, and you've been living so much as one of these energies that you think that there is only this energy, that the other energy doesn't even exist, and every time you get a little glimpse of it, you just think it's wrong. This is just incorrect. The opposite side is doing the wrong thing. I am doing the right thing. This is the way things should be, and everyone else needs to shape themselves into this energy. Whereas if you can recognize that this is your energy, this is where I'm at, this is what I am, I've long since reconciled that I'm mostly yin, and I'm so much happier for it, whilst being able to admire, acknowledge, and respect the yang. So take a little look at this. If you are mostly yang, let's accept and allow the yin, and even explore the yin within you. What would it be like if you're mostly a yang sort of person? What would it be like to be a little more receptive and open and emotional? What would that feel like? What would that be like to exhibit that emotion? And if you're more yin, what would it be like to put yourself, use that beautiful yin empathy that you have, that yin ability to mirror and to really mirror that yang energy? What would it feel like to be that driven? What would it feel like to have that much intense desire and fire within you? How would that feel? This leads to, if you can really understand and you can really, really get to feeling these energies, it can give you the most beautiful sexual experiences you could possibly imagine. Because balanced yin, balanced yang coming together, is this not what sexual union is? Even if you look at the yin yang symbol, the two forms together, they're sort of slotting into each other, right? Aren't we physically constructed to embody physically these yin and yang principles, with the yang being this powerful action physical force, and it literally enters into the yin form, and the yin form being more compassionate and soft and yielding, and the yang goes into the yin, and this creates this union. But all too often in our society, it's all physical. All we think about is the physical, and it just becomes an almost violent act, because we're not connecting on the spiritual level, and we're not connecting on the energetic level. But if you can connect the physical, yin and yang coming together, with the energies resonating together, because this is what happens when the energies are balanced and the energies come together, they start to resonate on the same level. And have you ever felt that sensation of not feeling complete and not feeling whole? When you can resonate with the opposite energy, that's when this creates something incredible and one of these mind-blowing experiences, because you are finally experiencing the entire spectrum of human energy, because the yin and yang is finally reconciled. But you won't have these experiences if you don't understand the fundamental nature of the yin yang. I've gone into a lot there. There's probably quite a lot to digest. This one has been very difficult to put together. I've done a few attempts trying to do this one. I hope I've done it justice, and I hope I've explained as compassionately as I can, because I understand that there is an inherent insult to a Western mind, because we are obsessed with yang, and we think yang is the best way forwards, and everyone should be yang, and yang means good, and yang means successful. So when I start to say that women exhibit mostly yin energies, this is inherently offensive. I know, and whatever, because it's my podcast, and this is how I see it. But I hope I've explained that actually, if you look at the curious opposite nature of all things, eventually, if you are going to look at it as which one's going to win, the yin or the yang, the yin is going to win eventually. Even though it's not about winning or losing, but which one is the ultimate, which one will be the one that, when everything does balance out, and it could be an almost infinite amount of time until things do balance out, the yin state is the subtle state, and the yin state is the long game. So the yang might be the atom bomb, the yang might be the fire and the direct force and the aggression and the violence, but the yin is the rebuilding process and the life-giving, and the yin is the ever-present constant state, and is the fertile state, and is the life-giving state. So ultimately, yin is the one that sees this balance through to the end, and I admire the yin. I do. I'm more closely affiliated I have a closer affinity with the moon and with the cold and with the melancholy and the passive and the creative and the reflective. I'm not so yang. I hope some of these words have been useful. I would be intrigued to hear what people think of all of this. Whether you agree, disagree, I'd love to hear it. That's my thoughts on Yin Yang, episode 3. So I wanted to do this one right in the middle, because this is the balance as everything sort of comes right into the middle. This is the yin and the yang. I just wanted to explain a little more on that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it's been useful for you. Namaste. Take care.